Can you start with strategies? Yeah, that's the next topic. So, yeah, quickly, if you can type, what's your understanding of the word strategy? You all come from very different backgrounds and would have different understandings of the word. So, what's your understanding of strategy? Strategy is a process. Suresh says plain and process. Kalpana, can you explain what you mean by plain and process? Garda says procedure. Yes. To deal with something. Okay.
So I'm not plan.
Oh, okay. There's an E there.
I
Okay.
think
A plan or a process. Okay. Got
plan
it.
or a process.
Yeah. Thanks, Kalpana. Yeah. How it will work and how you work. Okay, great. So, do you realize that sometimes, remember yesterday we talked about, let's say, a relationship strategy that I was telling you about this client who was in, she went through 3 different relationships, and the way she entered that relationship and what happened in between to how she exited that relationship, there was a pattern every time. Or we looked at yesterday another client who had spikes of learning when they had a major life event happening in their life, right? That was when they felt motivated to learn, correct? So a lot of times, again, strategies are again patterns, right? So, or processes of program. So what's your understanding of the word program? Because we're talking about neuro-linguistic programming, right? So when you say programming, what does a program mean? What's your understanding of a program? And it's okay if you give me a completely IT definition of a program. What does a program mean? Conditioning? What's the definition of program in information technology in the IT industry? Programming means coding, a pattern, yes. A series of commands to get a desired output, yes. A set of instructions. Conditioning of the brain, okay, right. Correct. So basically, let's say if you look at a machine, if you look at a computer, or if you look at a phone or any such gadget that we have. Hang on. Give me a moment. Yeah. So you have, let's say, an input, which means a signal or some information is getting into the system, and there is processing happening inside, right? So there's a set of patterns. There are these lines and lines and lines of code, and then you get a particular output. Okay, so it is input, process, output, right? And there are a set of lines and commands and codes that have been programmed to a machine, right? Now, we also have programs. They are slightly more subjective. They are not as clearly defined as what you would see in a computer or a gadget. There is that subjectivity. However, there are a lot of patterns, and we also have those programs inbuilt to us, right? So you would see that a certain trigger will always get the similar response out of you. Let's say if somebody let's say, go back to food again, and somebody gives you the food that you really don't like, you're going to have a similar reaction, right? Or if you feel very, very patriotic, right? You love your country so much, and if somebody else says something against your country, and your response is going to be the same, more or less the same every time, correct? So stimulus, process, and there's response. Okay. And strategies are a little more complex than that. There could be a series of triggers internally, so, or maybe that one stimulus which can trigger many things internally. So let's look a little more about strategy. What do we have strategies for, right? So look at this. Okay. It is the order and the sequence of internal and external representations that produce a specific result. So we all understand internal representation. It's right there, right? So stimulus, visual, we have deletion, distortion, generalization, and then you have internal representation. Remember the skull diagram? right? And an external representation is how we are behaving, right? And how we are responding. So we might say something or we might do something, and that is what we are projecting. Okay, so a strategy, let's say if it's a buying strategy, you know, how do we make a decision, let's say to buy the clothes you're wearing, for example. Let's say if it's a favorite shirt or a favorite top that you have, what pattern goes into deciding how you buy it. Okay, you might have one or you might have two patterns in which you do it, depending on whether you're buying something formal or informal, or you know, so many other parameters. The other simple definition is how we do stuff. Okay, so input, process, output or result. Now we could design a strategy and we could do the best strategy possible, right? But we also need to identify that trigger. If you do not have the trigger, the strategy will not get started. For example, people who have a program or a strategy to have a phobia, correct? Unless they see it, it will not get triggered. Either they have to see the external image, or they have to remember it and see that internal image, and then that whole process will get triggered, correct? If you have to enjoy food, each person again will enjoy it very, very differently. For example, for me, it really doesn't matter how the food looks, correct? But for my son, if the food is presented very well, he just enjoys the food much more. Correct? Do you know people who like to present their food very well and who like their food to be presented to them very well? And how many of you really don't care how it's presented? As long as it's hygienic, tasty, smells good, tastes good, you're okay. Yeah? How many of you like your food to be presented visually well? You do? Okay. Should look clean, okay? But what if it's not fancily presented and things like that? Okay, for some people that's very important. So for example, there was a 2 months where we had to shift from one city to another. So my wife went early and my son and I were together for 2 months in Pune, the old city that we were in. And so I was packing his breakfast and lunch and I was doing this, and obviously I'm not as skilled a cook as my wife is, but I had very high ratings for my food throughout those 2 months, you know, like higher than my wife, because they're simple. His name is Prabhav, so it starts with the P. So if I had to, make a sandwich for him, I would write a little P with ketchup. Okay. Then he also thought that he was a superhero, so he called himself P Man. So another time, with little small pieces of cheese, I wrote P Man, and he really didn't bother what was inside or what was under that piece of bread. Right? It could have been the most terrible sandwich, but he really appreciated that. So now to know what triggers that specific response, right, is the most important part when you start identifying a person's strategy. Now, if you're seeing that a person has a strategy or a pattern that's really not ecological or useful for them. For example, let's say my strategy to write an exam. So every time I have to write an exam, I go into fight or flight. I really get into a very bad state. I panic. I start getting acidity. That because of that acidity, I also get ulcers. I can't sleep at night, and it's all a disaster. Even if I know the subject well, I don't do. How many of us used to feel very nervous, before just before exam? Me never. Okay, but a lot of us do, right? Okay. So definitely there is a strategy to also feel nervous. There's a specific pattern, right? Now as NLPers, we can ask metamodel questions, and also we can observe from their physiology, and we can look for eye movements. Now I'm going to talk about eye movements in a bit, but all this physiological information is going to give us a pattern. Okay, and now we can, if you know that now this pattern is not useful for this particular client, you can change that one specific bit of pattern and reprogram that part so that this person starts feeling good or that particular problem is solved. Okay, all right, let me show you one little thing about strategies before we talk about changing strategies. Okay, so we have strategies for pretty much everything we do. Look at these list, guys, and it's not an exhaustive list. There's this for everything. Correct? You might say, what could be a strategy for waking up? Can there be a strategy for waking up, for example? Think about it. What could be a strategy for waking up? And can it be different from one person to the other? Exactly. Having that one particular alarm could be one, right? Setting an alarm is one, right? And then eyes open. And you might also start thinking about bingo, meaning what I tell myself at night. Do I meditate before going to sleep, or do I keep watching my gadget and then just fall asleep while I'm doing this, and then I don't know how I'm going to wake up? Yeah, Suhas saying you keep snoozing the alarm. Yes, there are people who might wake up and drink 1 whole liter of water. I know some people who go and gulp 1 liter of water, or some people drink lemon juice and water. Okay, so for that one particular cycle, one particular action of waking up, there are different triggers. Correct? Sorry. Do you have a strategy for public speaking, for example? Right? For understanding something, for learning, for motivation, for happiness, for feeling bored, for forgetting, for remembering. Right? We have strategies for everything we do. There are patterns, and there is a stimulus response kind of a thing for everything we do. Just one sec. Yeah.
அப்படி இருந்தா நான் உங்களை கூப்பிட மாட்டேன் சார்.
So how do we change a strategy and how do we identify? The first thing that we do is elicit a strategy. Okay, so if I go back to that example of that lady who had those spikes of learning, right? That came up just through questioning. So I asked her, when was your first memory of when you felt, of you feeling completely motivated to learn? And she told me that exact incidents, and she described a lot of things. And then I asked her more and more and more meta-model questions on that. And then I asked her what happened the second time, what happened the third time. And I asked her, was there any time where you didn't have a life-changing moment or a life-changing situation and you felt very motivated to learn? She couldn't remember one single time where everything was relaxed. She had a lot of time on hand, no threat, no external stimulus, and internally she felt motivated to start studying. That had never happened to her. Okay, so now this strategy worked for her very well when there was a crisis and she learned. Okay, but now if there is no external crisis, she's never going to learn. Now that becomes a limiting strategy, right? Now we need to add a few more elements in that strategy so that even when there is no emergency or no life-changing event, she can still learn. Right? So when you want to change that one particular strategy, you can use any of those NLP tools to change that. So you can do a collapse anchor, you can do a swish, you can do submodality work, you can look at beliefs and change those beliefs for them. Okay, you can use any of these techniques to change that one particular part. Now her trigger is external crisis. Now you add another trigger to help her trigger her learning. Is that good? Is that a good example? Have you understood where we are going to do strategy work? Okay, Ghada, which part did you not get? The last part. So, do you understand this part where this lady was learning only when there was a problem or a life-changing situation? Either she was getting married in a short time, so she would quickly learn. Son not well, so she would quickly learn. Or now she has to go to a different country, so she'll start learning quickly. Correct? So only when there was a major external change, only that time she was learning. But that was not a very good strategy for her to have, right? Because all other times when there is no problem, she would not learn. Okay, so her trigger is that external event. Now I have to introduce another trigger for her, which could be another anchor, or I might swish a particular state, or I might do any of these techniques to give her another trigger to start learning, which is an internal trigger for her to start learning. So that is how I'm modifying her learning strategy. Similarly, you can modify somebody's buying strategy, you can modify somebody's relationship strategy, you can modify somebody's stress strategy. Is that understood? Is that okay? Good. I see an aha. How do you know which strategy to use? Okay. No, see, the strategy will come from your understanding of the client's model of the world. Correct? So now their outcome is maybe, let's say if I am a client, so I'm going to say, so I need to learn many more things. You know, I want to learn, but somehow something is holding me back. I'm unable to learn new things very easily. Okay, so now you know that you need to work on my learning strategy. It is coming from their outcome, or it is coming from their problem statement. Okay, so now you have to start understanding my learning strategy, which you can do by, you know, asking me questions, and my eyes will move in a certain way, or you'll see a change in my physiology, and I'll also give you answers. You get all those patterns, and then you see a pattern which is not very ecological for me. You'll see a pattern which is not useful. Then you just change that one pattern and you would have changed my strategy. So it is very, very custom made, or like it's like a tailor made piece of clothing. Can we analyze and understand strategy for happiness? Of course, yes. What makes you happy? When were you the happiness? When were you the happiest, Rujita? And you'll see that there's a pattern. There might be 2 or 3 triggers that have made you the happiest. All right. So can we move on to the next one? Yeah, maybe strategies is a very interesting topic. Probably you can do a masterclass on this sometime. Okay. Now, this is one thing that will make you very, very powerful. Just by the way somebody's eyes move in response to a question you ask, you might be able to understand what's happening in their mind. Okay. Sometimes you might even be able to know if they are faking something. Okay. So let us say you ask somebody a question, their eyes will move in 6 possible directions. Okay. Either they will move here like this. Okay. If the eyes move like this, which basically means when you are facing your client, if they move to your top right corner, so your right hand top corner, it will mean that they are remembering a picture. It's a visual recall. Okay. If it moves straight in the line of their ears, if it moves like that to your right and parallel to the ground, it is auditory recall, which means they are remembering a sound. If it moves down, they are talking to themselves, which is auditory digital. If it moves up to your left corner, then it's visual constructed. It means that they're constructing an image before responding to you. Okay. Here they were remembering. In VR, they were remembering a picture before talking to you. And here they are constructing an image before talking to you. Here they are constructing a sound before talking to you. And if it moves down to the left, it is kinesthetic. They're feeling something. Okay. So you might want to go back to your, what is digital? It's auditory digital, basically self-talk. Okay. So these are all the eye assessing movements, and you would have in your practitioner manuals, you can see what kind of questions you can ask your client to calibrate. Okay. Now what you're seeing here is a normally organized person. Okay. If the person can be called normally organized, then this is where their movements are. Okay. Now some people could be reverse organized, which means that their VR and VC could swap places. They could be two different, they could swap places, or they could have their auditory and construct and auditory recall swapped, or they could have their K and AD swapped. Okay. Now they could be reverse organized on any one of the axis, any two of the axis, or all three. Okay. So one can be reverse organized on any of these axes. But the one thing to remember is V does not take the place of A. So visual is always the top two, auditory is always the middle two, and K and AD are always the bottom two. Only between them they could change place. Okay. Yes. Suresh, you're saying when can reverse swap happen? There is no real data as to, it's just how you're organized. So if a person is reverse organized in visual, they will always, their VR will be on the opposite side. Okay. Why does it happen? No data, no real data available. Are left-handed people reverse organized? Again, there is no pattern as such. Okay. So there's really no data or no plausible reason that we know as to why people are reverse organized on any of this one. They're just very broad conventions. So the idea is, before you start making some meaning out of eye movements, you may have to really understand and calibrate the person very well. Okay, everybody okay with this? Any questions on eye movements, eye assessing patterns? Okay. What is AC? Auditory constructed, which means they are they're creating a sound in their mind. VC is visual constructed. Suresh, it's nothing unusual, abnormal, or any of that if somebody is reverse organized. That's just how they are. Nothing wrong if you're reverse organized. So neither are you extraordinarily brilliant, nor are you really very dumb if you're reverse organized. How do you calibrate? Okay. So remember yesterday, Suresh, if you were there, every time you say something, you change the internal representation of the person, right? There is something happening in their mind. So if you ask them a particular question, so for example, Suresh, did you have eye assessing cues in your practitioner? Was it taught in your practitioner course?
Sorry, can you just ask once again the question?
Did they teach you eye assessing patterns in your practitioner program?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know very well. What I'm asking is about this reverse swap, what you talked about. This is something.
How do you calibrate?
For me, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you want to know how to calibrate, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're working with a client, so if it's a formal client practitioner relationship, you can ask them, you can already tell them, right? Okay, I'm going to ask you some funny questions now. I want you to just play along. Okay. And then if you ask them, when you were in your third grade, when you were like 7 years old, okay, what was the color of your classroom? Okay. So now if you look at this question, we know that they were in third grade. We knew, right? We know that for sure, right? They were somewhere, and they went to a classroom, and the classroom had a some particular color to the wall. Okay. Now, if their eyes move this way, which is where I'm indicating VR, let's say, right? If the eyes move here, right? And look at your question. Nobody needs to lie about this, right? Like if it is pink, they're not going to say it was green, right? Typically, you would catch them like that. So you know that this question is calibrated to get a visual recall response. And if the eyes move here, and if the eyes move here 2 or 3 times for a similar set of questions, then you now know that this person's VR is here. If the VR is here, then their VC is going to be opposite. Okay. If you ask them, okay, I want you to now start playing your favorite song when you were, in your nursery. And if the eyes move here, then you know that this is their auditory recall, because they are recalling that music in their mind.
Excuse me, sir. I have a thing. See, I know all these aspects. What I am asking is, if a guy is having a reverse swap, should we confirm with them by asking whether it is right or wrong? That's the aspect I want to know.
No, it is nothing right or wrong, Suresh. It's just how they are organized. It's just for you to know how they are organized. It's like, is it wrong to write with the left hand? Some people are left-handed, some people are right-handed.
Fine, thank you.
Is that the answer you're looking for? Okay, right, okay. Have I answered your question, Suresh? Are you okay with that?
Sir, actually the aspect is normal eye accessing cues I am very comfortable with, and I am a master practitioner.
Okay.
What you talked about regarding this reverse swap is something I am hearing for the first time.
Okay,
so I thought I will clarify about it. That's what.
Let's not call it reverse swap. Okay, it is reverse organized. Normally organized, reverse organized. Okay. So for some people, the VR could be here, and for some other people, the VR could be on the opposite side. That's all there is to it. Okay. All right. So where all do we use this? Now you can use this to find out strategies. So literally, in some schools of NLP, I have not done much of it. Literally like how they had this stenotypist who used to do this one shorthand. So people would say, okay, I asked them this question and the eyes moved here. So VR followed by K followed by VC, that's what the notations are, and then they would get an idea of a strategy. You can also elicit strategy by asking a lot of meta model questions and observing their physiology. Okay. Now there are 2 other techniques where you directly need to know the eye assessing patterns. One is something called overlapping, and we really are a little tight on time, so I can't cover overlapping now. But another important technique in NLP, and I use that very widely, and that's the visual swish. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the visual swish, and there you go. Okay, so even for visual swish, you need to know a trigger. So where do you use visual swish? Can you go back to your practitioner days and think and tell me where you use visual swish? Can't find my chat. Okay, Clifford says to erase a bad memory. When someone has a bad memory. Yes, Rujita, you've not done it. When you want to alter a limiting belief. Yes, Suresh. You want to change a bad memory, you want to change, you want to limiting belief. Can it also be used to alter a pattern or break a pattern? Yes, right. So remember yesterday I was talking to you about this client who had a fear that someone is hiding in my back seat. You know, when they would sit, they would, you know, especially when driving in the dark, driving alone in the dark. So the moment they would sit in their seat, this used to get triggered. And a very specific trigger was when they looked in the rear view mirror. So let's say it's dark, I just got in my car, I'm sitting there, let's say I'm pulling my seat belt, and if they looked in the rear view mirror, that's when this whole fear that someone is hiding in my back seat, that's when it was getting triggered. Okay, so the first very important step in the swish pattern is to identify what is triggering the existing unwanted behavior or pattern. It's very important to find the trigger. So now in this case, it was the sight of the rear view mirror when it was dark. So everything around is dark. I'm in the driver's seat and I'm seeing that rear view mirror. Okay, so you need to get a very, very specific trigger from the client and also that pattern which is getting triggered after that. So can we call this the present state? The present state is I'm sitting in the car, look at the mirror, freak out. I think that someone's hiding behind, they're going to stab me. And then that's going to trigger a complete response, unresourceful response in me. Okay, so that's the present state. Okay, then you ask them, what is your desired state under the same set of conditions, right? And at times they might say, yeah, I don't want to feel fear. Okay, but the unconscious mind does not process negatives. Remember that? So you need to get them to define a desired state in the affirmative and as clearly as possible with as many clear submodalities to that desired state as possible. So in both the cases, you need to ask finer details and distinctions and get as many submodalities of that particular trigger and that experience as possible. Okay. Now you ask them to sit and imagine that they are sitting in front of a television screen. Okay, maybe a couple of feet away, and ask them to get a picture of the present state. Okay, now the present state has to be associated, which means that it's as if they are seeing it through their own eyes. The present state has to be disassociated, and the desired state would be, yeah, I'm feeling calm and I'm enjoying the drive. Okay, that desired state has to be dissociated. Okay, please make a note of this. Present state associated, desired state dissociated. All right. Then ask them to bring a picture of that desired state there, overlapping the first image or covering the first image. Then ask them to make that desired state image of the desired state very small and place it in their kinesthetic, which is their right bottom corner or your left bottom corner. Here. So this is where their kinesthetic is, if they are normally organized. If they are reverse organized, their DS is going to be to the right, on the opposite side. Yes? Here. You need to place it in their kinesthetic. And if their kinesthetic is here, ask them to place it here. Okay. Now ask them to enhance the submodalities of the desired state, which means make it brighter, more colors, more vibrant colors, make it more interesting, make it more attractive, you know, all that. Ask them. Some people also ask, ask their clients to imagine that they have a remote control. And when they play around with the keys, they can actually change the properties of this small image. They can make it brighter, they can have better contrast, more vibrant colors and things like that. So the idea is you get this desired state to look very, very attractive for the client. And then you have to tell them, when I tell you to, I'm going to say 1, 2, 3 and swish. When I make the sound swish, I want you to blow this image completely, like blow it big and completely cover the screen. Okay, so you say 1, 2, 3, swish, and blow it. Okay, once they've done that, do a quick break state. It could be a click of a sound, say coffee, tea, whatever, and ask them to bring it back again. Make it even smaller, even brighter, make the submodalities even more attractive, and say 1, 2, 3, swish again. And the word need not be swish, it can be zip, zoom, whatever you like. Just make sure it's not a break state and it's not too funny that this person just opens their eyes and starts laughing. So make that sound something that's very motivating for them. Okay, now you have to do that. The break state after you blow it is very important. Okay, otherwise they just keep going in loops. So bring it back again, swish, and do this multiple times. Initially you have to take them through every step slowly. So go step by step and give them enough time to understand this process. After repeating it a few times, do it very quickly. Okay, so bring it back in, 1, 2, 3, swish, and a break state. Bring it back in, 1, 2, 3, swish. Right? You need to do it at that rate. The whole idea is that the memories really get completely scrambled. These DS and PS images have to get completely scrambled so that the pattern that they're hardwired into actually breaks down. Like there are new neural pathways getting created, the old ones breaking down. Okay, when you do this multiple times and when you calibrate, so initially people will and usually they have their eyes closed, right? When they do a swish and you do it very powerfully, people actually move their heads, or you'll see some eye movement, right? Another very important thing is the power of the swish for the client is proportional to or depends upon your energy level. Okay, so if you're just going to say, okay, bring it back again, and when I say swish, you have to bring it here, and you say 1, 2, 3, swish, that's not going to happen, right? It has to be really energetic, like 1, 2, 3, swish, bring it back in, and 1, 2, 3, swish. Okay, bring that thing in you. So it becomes it's a very powerful experience for them. And after some time, you bring the thing back again to the small corner and ask them what's happened to the image of the present state. And usually the image would have either completely gone or it would have gotten replaced by something else. If that image is still there, it means you need to do it even more powerfully and repeat it many, many more times. So keep repeating it till you see that the client has completely forgotten the image of the present state. Then you do test and you do future pace. Question, Suresh, isn't it we bring an anchoring before that, before you go swish, break state from the current state and bring it to the desired state? Yes, when you blow the desired state, you are doing a break state and then bringing it back. So you do a break state. Anchor is an optional thing. Sometimes if they get if you want to have them an anchor of courage or anchor of happiness, you may want to do it. But an anchor is definitely recommended when you do the fast phobia cure. So it's always good as a practitioner to be in control of things. If you want to quickly bring them back to a positive state, if you find that they've gone into an unresourceful state, you can have a very strong anchor for them for a positive state. So you can have resource anchors. The answer is yes. Okay, any questions here? Yeah, this again is something that that I strongly recommend learning in class. It's more of a refresher for those of you who have already done it. Should the desired state always be in kinesthetic emotional connect? Yes. So the brighter the submodality is, if there's an emotional connect to it, it always works a lot more effective. But as a break state, you can ask them to bring it in the opposite side once in a while. But not always, because there's another variant of a swish, and Tony Robbins also does it many times, is they ask you to imagine that there's a big hoarding of the present state, and the desired state is like a little image, and you use that catapult, no, not a catapult, what is that called? Yeah, catapult. And you're stretching it and you let go with a swish sound that goes and smashes itself into that big hoarding, and then it opens up. Right? So that's another variant of swish. So the whole idea is you quickly break the present state image and overlap it with the desired state. and you introduce a break state every time you do it. DS, the desired state should be as colorful, as many nice, enjoyable submodalities that the client wants. Yes, make it as beautiful, colorful, happy, enjoyable for them. Make it very, very attractive for them. Yes. Present state could be as it is. You need not change or influence it. Keep the present state as it is, as the way they see it. A visual collapse is another way to break the present state. Yes, that's also a variant of the visual swish. Yes. Okay. So we are running a little tight on time. So let me move to the next technique. If you have more questions, please feel free to ask them here or in the WhatsApp group. Be happy to get back to you. Okay. So how many of you remember time-based techniques or timeline therapy? So timeline therapy has been copyrighted or patented by Tad James, and we use timeline, some of these time-based techniques as temporal submodalities, and that's taught at the practitioner as well as the master practitioner level. Okay, so we all have different ways in which we represent time. You remember, if the timeline passes through our head, it is called in time. If the timeline is in front of us like that, from left to right, it is in through time, in time and through time. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's say there's a future event that's going to happen. Let's say a presentation or an important meeting and all that, right? And you're feeling very anxious about it. So anxiety is the emotion. Okay, so typically you can ask your client, even if they are in time, you can ask them to organize their timeline in front of them, ask them to step over it, dissociate with it, move ahead on the timeline, and go back to that time which is after the event, and imagine that, you know, ask them what they've done with that. Oh. Yeah, sorry. Okay. So do you have any questions on timeline? Because we do not have the time to run the entire thing now. We just barely have about 10 minutes left. So do you have any questions on timeline? Yes, Gada, please go ahead. Okay. Downtime and uptime is not really related to timeline or time-based techniques, right? But downtime and uptime, the difference is basically when it's downtime, you are focused more internally and your auditory digital is very high and you're processing. Uptime is when you are taking in all the sensory information that you can and processing it. So when you're learning, it's recommended to have a very high uptime. When you're thinking for yourself, solving problems and all that, that's when you have the downtime. Any reading material or video? Yeah, there's a whole book on timeline written by Tad James. And I think Wyatt Woodsmall is also the co-author of that. So we'll share the title with you. You'll be able to find it online somewhere. So there's this whole book on timeline therapy. Happy to share that. Yeah. A difference in timeline technique between different schools of NLP. They're broadly the same, Gada. The idea is that you dissociate yourself from a certain set of events and you play around with the time submodalities of it. So that the idea again is to basically create a dissociation and have a different internal representation of events arranged on a timeline. Okay. Yeah, any questions? Overall, we're almost out of time, but yeah, happy to take a few questions. Okay, timeline can be used very powerfully when let's say there are a series of events. Let's say I've had several traumatic incidences in my past, Zimna, okay, for example. And let's say, what might that be? Okay, let's say, I won't take a very, very strongly traumatic one, but let's say I've had 5 or 6 times that I've had small accidents. I fell off a bike, I crashed my car into a pole, something like that happened, right? So 5 or 6. And each time I felt very scared, I was injured, I felt pain and things like that, right? So I want to sort of decrease the intensity of the emotion of all of these, right? For all past, so yeah, so past memories or past limiting beliefs. And these limiting beliefs again could have certain submodalities, like they could have color, shape, and things like that. And they could be arranged on a timeline. So for example, if you take me into my timeline and take me above it and make me look behind at my entire past, right? I'll be able to, kind of organize those. I would have already organized those in some sort of a time space, right? And by getting me to change the submodalities of all of them in one go, you'll be able to help me, reduce the intensity of all those past negative emotions in one go. So that way it works very quickly. If you want to take let's say if I have guilt about some event from the past, then you can take me there and sort of dissociate me, or you can anchor me into, a particular learning from the past and take it to the future. So those are things that you can play around with in the timeline. Yeah, Suresh, bingo, spot on. So sometimes you can access positive in this one. You can anchor positive states. So basically, you can easily associate and dissociate with things, right? So for example, when I'm doing anchoring, and I want confidence as an anchor. So your standard that you'll do is go back in that time when you felt confident, right? And then see what you saw, and then you'll do the anchor, right? Now, you can actually make me walk on the timeline and go into that event when I actually felt very confident. Make me live that event, in which case that intensity will be much, much stronger, right? And then you can take me back into that, take me into the present moment, and then you can also take me forward into that future event that I'm feeling anxious about. And then you take me there and then fire that anchor there. So you can also help me to reduce the anxiety about a future event. So here, I mean, there are no fixed rules. The idea is how do you use your creativity, and more importantly, how do you use the client's model of the world? Use their language, their internal representation, their ways of seeing things and doing things, and then you pace it for some time, and then you lead them towards their outcomes. Great. So what next for you in your NLP journey? How do you want to use it? Where do you want to take it? If you want to share something with us, I'd be happy to know. Using timeline, or yeah, you could use it in coaching. You want to use it in your training? Yes. Sure. And if you would like to sort of continue your NLP journey with us, if you want us to be a part of that particular journey, please feel free to connect with us. We do have our practitioners and master practitioners on a fairly regular basis. So we're probably one of the earliest one to start a blended learning program where we had a 130-hour-long practitioner, where we were able to go much deeper with a lot of coaching ahead and things like that. We are coming up with a 200-hour-long master practitioner, and where most of the learning will happen by doing, So most of it is learning experientially, doing live projects and working with a coach. And almost about close to 30-35 sessions like these, and 8 days of classroom. So that's like a very, very rigorous master practitioner that we're coming up with. If any of you would like to refresh just the webinar part of our practitioners, you're free to join them. You could just go through the the 3.5 weeks of webinars. You could also want to do complete master practitioner with us as well. Most welcome. And my invitation to you would be to be a part of this community and continue to share your experiences. And if you'd like us to do more of these master classes, if you would like us to even do introductory programs for your friends, we are more than happy to do that. And if there are any other ways in which we could collaborate, create more content, open up new possibilities for you, we are more than happy to collaborate. Do we have a basic class, which is Clifford, do you mean a practitioner? The answer is yes. More elementary. Well, it would be then, Clifford, just an introductory one would usually be just scratching the surface. And, we're really not sure how much people can learn and how much they can use it. But we do a lot of introductory things, or sometimes we just do one-off, master classes for people to just understand one particular topic. So when is the next practitioner? We haven't scheduled one yet, but we'll get back to you, Shraddha, very soon. All right. So thank you so much for being amazing participants. I'm happy to have been of little value to you in your NLP journey. Please spread positivity. Please use your NLP skills to help yourself and also to help all the people around you to and contribute towards making this world an even better place. So thank you so much, and take care and be safe. All right, bye-bye. So I'm ending the meeting now. Thank you.